Steve Bowers welcoming you to Dialogue here at EPlusTV 6 and a conversation with Phil Cohen. He is the author of this book, War in the American Workforce. It's the Jackson Project is the name of the book. It's a memoir about his time in Jackson, Tennessee, which extended 1 year from March of 1989 to March of 1990, and what we call the Bemis Mill, as it turned out in some of its final days. And so we want to talk to him about that. He is a union organizer. And a union organizer in Jackson, Tennessee is about as welcome as a boll weevil in a cotton field. But that's where we will start. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Steve.
Appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. The circumstance under which you came to Jackson, Tennessee in '89.
Okay. My role within the union was that of a troubleshooter.
Okay.
The union sent me into the more difficult situations. When companies sent in union busters, the union sent in me.
Okay.
So it was the great American adventure.
Okay.
I'd like to think I did some good for folks along the way. Okay. But how that led me to Jackson was we had Local 281 at Bemis Mill. It was the old textile workers union, the old Norma Ray union.
Okay.
Back in those days. We had an anti-union company that had come to completely dominate the collective bargaining relationship. We knew the plant was about to be sold, but the company was being very tight-lipped about to whom. So the union sent me in, and my job was to rebuild the infrastructure of the local from the inside out and shift the balance of power in the collective bargaining relationship.
Okay. And giving this some context, in 1989 and after that, when the new ownership comes in, and it comes in after you arrive, shortly
Yes.
after you arrive here, was that the last ownership of the Bemis Mill?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
The mill was acquired by a Hong Kong investor, and he immediately retained the services of a notorious union-busting attorney who sought wage concessions, benefits concessions, things like that. So we were in contract negotiations with him. So for a number of months, my focus was on at least maintaining the level of wages and benefits people had, trying to improve them, in fact. But also, I encountered some working conditions, health and safety conditions, due process violations, that most Americans would think, yeah, that happens in China, what a shame. Right. But they wouldn't envision that happening here in a plant in the United States in the late 20th century.
Okay. One of the reasons I think that had happened, right, is this mill by that time is old. I mean,
yes.
It had been built right after the turn of the century. It probably at one time was state-of-the-art, and the labor relationships were totally different. When did Bemis actually organize? Do you know in its history
yes.
when it organized?
The local dates back to the 1940s.
Okay.
But the interesting thing, if I may, about the health and safety violations had nothing to do with the age of the mill.
Is that right? Okay.
I've always considered health and safety the single most important aspect of my job. I mean, for some of the workers, it's not like the sexiest part of union work, but I always tell them, I can't cut no deal for you if you're on the unemployment line or you're on disability. Okay? And so I've really focused on health and safety in my various plants, and most of the time there are things that really don't cost a lot of money to fix. They just deprioritize.
In the nature of the Bemis Mill's operation, textile, fiber, all that other stuff, breathing, all of this, I guess there are just many things that are almost inherent in that type of work, right? They can create problems for people.
Yeah, cotton dust is an issue. That wasn't one of the issues I encountered there. What I encountered there was people working weaving machines for 12 hours straight with no break whatsoever.
Okay.
I encountered people having to push buggies that had the wheels clogged up with dust, and you had people like walking around with ergonomic injuries and slings like it was downtown Beirut, not downtown Jackson. Something that once we held the company's feet to the fire was actually very easy and very cost-effective to fix.
Okay. What was your relationship like then with the company? When you come here, they're going to be leery of any kind of union organizer, but by that time the union, I don't want to say was debilitated, but it was demotivated in many ways.
Right. Well, initially in my process of remotivating the union local, identifying, training, developing new leadership, the relationship was very contentious. But what I always explain to people in management, I try to depersonalize my collective bargaining relationships. I would always tell them, look, this isn't personal. You got a job to do, I got a job to do. We may be on different sides of a certain issue, but if we approach this like business people, we can find some kind of middle ground. And so after I'd been here, about 5-6 months, we'd actually developed a productive collective bargaining relationship. We were working through issues, we were cleaning up the health and safety problems, but here's the kicker, and here's the real reason Bemis Mill shut. the new owners of American Mills refurbished the plant with $3 million worth of new equipment that was not designed to operate on wooden floors. They put in what then was state-of-the-art sulfur looms designed to operate on concrete, and they couldn't operate on wooden floors. So American Mills, the second of my 3 owners, rises and falls in 5 months. And the plant shuts. Then it's taken over by United Foods, astonishingly a vegetable company, getting into the textile business. They flat out came in trying to bust a union. They had a history back in the late 80s of taking over distressed facilities, and if there was a union, getting rid of it one way or another. And that's when all hell broke loose.
Did they intend to stay in the textile business long term as you look back on it now, United Foods?
That was their intent then, and I believe they actually now have some sort of other textile operation.
In the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think they were, Bemis Mill was an experiment about expanding into kind of a new area of manufacturing for them.
Okay. The Bemis Mill, I mean, you know, when it's built, I mean, other than maybe the boiler works here, I mean, there wasn't a lot of industry in the South, and so it was kind of a total experiment, really, to come in here and to do this kind of thing. At least in this area, it was.
Well, in a sense, turn of the century, the South was to manufacturing what the Third World is today. Okay. So you had a lot of industry coming down south, and especially textiles, but other types of industry as well, looking for cheap labor. The original textile workers. And in fact, some of the older workers have that background that here with Bemis Mill and many other places where I went. They came from a sharecropping background. Right. And for them, getting a job in a factory after growing up in a sharecropper environment, it's like their ship had come in.
Oh, yeah, step up. I mean, you had running water, you had cold heat, you had many things. Yeah, right. I mean, they had a YMCA and all this stuff.
Right. So
a movie theater.
So it was a lot easier to get people to work for less.
Yeah, okay. And so then you come in. So by the time you come in, you've got your own history.
Yes.
Tough street history in New York and everything.
That's right.
Becoming a union organizer. You got a very specific job to do. Did you know anything about Jackson before you got here?
I was briefed. I can see those movies of the airplane pilots get briefed about where they're going to bomb an hour before they do it. I was at a meeting in Chattanooga. I was actually going to be assigned someplace else. And I met with these 2 different directors, and we sat down, and someone brought up what was happening in Jackson, and I was told, get back on your car, get an I-40, you're going to Jackson.
Going to Jackson, wow.
And I kind of had about a 2-hour briefing.
Okay.
You know, boots hit the ground, figure it out.
Okay. So the situation is we're about to go through a transition ownership of the Bemis Mill.
That's right.
Got a brand new Oriental owner that's coming in here. They're going to invest millions of dollars into this company.
Right.
And it's not going to work. They don't know that yet.
And we certainly didn't.
Okay. The book is called The Jackson Project. It is a war in the American workplace. It's the work of Phil Cohen, who spent a year in the city from March of 1989 to March of 1990 as a union organizer. We'll continue this conversation. This is Dialogue at EPlusTV 6. Welcome back to Dialogue at EPlusTV 6 and a conversation with Phil Cohen. He's the author of this book, The Jackson Project, published by the University of Tennessee Press out of Knoxville, Tennessee. It just came out in the year of our Lord here, 2016. He is visiting in Jackson, has done a book signing. And you're doing speaking and other things now as a result of this book.
Yes, yeah. I've been speaking at a lot of union conferences. I've been invited to do a presentation at the National AFL-CIO beginning of December.
Okay. What is their interest in this book? What is it bringing that is different?
What's different about this book, there have been a lot of books written about unions, and they're all from people standing on the outside looking in. They may look in and like what they see, don't like what they see, but they're professors, they're journalists. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only book about unions written by a union organizer who lived in the trenches.
Okay.
And I don't think there's anything less understood in this society than unions.
Okay.
And one of the things I was looking to do when I wrote this book, Americans love nothing more than a good blue-collar drama, a blue-collar thriller, and it's been done about the mafia and cops and robbers, like just, ad nauseum, but there's been hardly any dramatization by organized labor.
Okay.
And so I thought for this to be the book that really both dramatizes and explains the real story of what happens inside unions.
It says a context for the Bemis Mill in 1989 and 1990. That's the years that Phil was in this city from March of 89 to March of 1990. We want to go back to that. It is interesting in reading this because we're not accustomed to local people being described like they are in books, like slightly rotund or whatever, or a heavy drinker or a womanizer or whatever. You delve into the personalities of key people in this book, not in a slanderous way. It's just the way things were, and because it affects their work and the things that they are, and it bespeaks their personality, I think.
Well,
we're just not accustomed to reading about our relatives this way.
I hear you. But since this was intended as a literary work, it's about the people. And you can't really depict people unless you depict the whole person.
Right.
So I laid out the strength, and I did it to myself as well. Everybody's got their vulnerabilities, everybody's got their strengths. And my goal, when I wrote this book, my guiding principle was just tell it like it was.
Okay. Now, when you came in 1989 to set the stage, the Bemis Mill had gone through several different changes, but it was owned at that time by
a Pakistani investor named Humayun Sheikh.
Okay. And so Phil is going to hit the final stage of that because the company is being sold to an Oriental investor. Okay. And so part of your work was come in, health and safety violations, stabilize this union, show people the importance of it, start addressing, trying to effectively address some of the grievances, in some cases that hadn't been dealt with in years.
That's correct.
Okay.
That
and so
is
trying
correct.
to catch things up and to convince people that you can actually do something.
That's right. You know, one of the ways in which you organize people in any situation, it doesn't have to be unions, but to pull people together, you got to start by going after the low-hanging fruit. Like, what's something that needs to be addressed and it's accessible. You're pretty sure you can make it happen and make it happen quick if you just do your job, and from there you build and you gain credibility.
When you started bringing up some of the personnel issues, and there's a grievance process that's set out in federal law, the company has to go along with that.
That's correct.
And when they did, the plant manager took it as a personal insult.
Yeah,
right?
I found that one of the almost most incredulous kind of parts of the relationship there. Because normally a professional, especially if you approach them like a gentleman, and you say, you know, right up front, this isn't personal, we both have a job to do, I respect you're doing your job, respect you're doing my job, you know, we're both business people, we can work things out, and they take it personally.
Okay.
That's,
I
I haven't seen too much of that, actually.
Is that right? Interesting. You know, now, once you got these hearings and things, you said that you established what you considered an effective working relationship after about 6 months here.
Yes.
And a brand new owner comes in, Oriental owner, you met him.
Right, and actually, now that relationship happened, I was only here for about 2 months under Humayun Sheikh.
Okay.
So the new relationship actually developed with the Hong Kong
Investors, okay. All right. What was the name of their company?
American Mills.
American Mills. All right. So when American Mills comes in, this man is committed to and does put millions of dollars in new equipment.
Yes.
Hires 125 new people.
Yes.
So they were convinced they could turn this textile operation around.
Yeah, he's an interesting story, as best, to be honest, as I could piece it together somewhat secondhand, but I think this is fairly credible. He comes from a very, very wealthy textile family in China. And he was a young man at the time. He wanted to branch out on his own and, you know, have his own factory in the United States.
Get into the North American market. Then.
Yeah, and so he settled on what at the time was Tennessee Textiles, which was Bemis's mill at the name at the time. And so he came in and he made this enormous investment with his family's money, primarily in new equipment.
Okay. But the new equipment, once they installed it, hired these new people, doesn't work.
That's right. Now, it took me several months to find out, because initially I'm being told in contract negotiations across the table, well, startup's a little bit slower than we thought, but like we're on a roll, everything's going to be great. So I felt, you know, 4 or 5 months in, I'm feeling fairly optimistic. Looks like the plant's going to make it. A successful turnaround's happening. The local union's been rebuilt. I thought in a few months, I'm out of here. You know, job well done. And then things started happening. It was really clear the business was deteriorating. They were wanting to make this change, make that change. And eventually, I kind of found out through off the record, if you will, that the problem was that the wrong looms had been installed in the mill.
Okay. You said that they were designed to work on concrete.
Yes.
Bemis was a wood facility. What problem did that create?
It creates a level of vibration that does not allow the looms to put out a product, to put out a cloth that meets customer specs.
Okay. Did they acknowledge that? Ever?
On the record, no, it came out during the bankruptcy court. I mean, it came out, United Foods, which ultimately took over the company, they prepared a booklet for the primary debtors of American Mills, to the people that were going to be owed, that were owed a lot of money by American Mills, because they were like catastrophically in debt at this point, okay? Including the guy they bought the mills from.
Okay.
And so they have a section in this booklet to the debtors, which I'm paraphrasing as kind of the reasons for the rise and fall of American Mills.
Okay.
And they lay out the primary reason was exactly as I stated, that the mill had been refurbished with the wrong equipment.
Okay.
And interestingly, they don't even touch on labor relations at all as one of the reasons why American Mills didn't make it.
Okay. Did that factor, or it was not?
No, it wasn't a factor.
Or what was happening then to the union, to the workers and anything else? You come in with this expectation, millions of dollars in new equipment. I'm sure you used that as a bargaining edge.
Yes,
right?
we
If
did.
you can afford this, you can afford us,
Absolutely,
right?
and that was our bargaining strategy.
Okay, okay. And you got 125 new employees, so there's got to be this thing of like, all right, we're going to turn this thing around.
And that was the feeling.
Okay.
And it was an absolute shock to the workforce, to me, to the community, when it turned out that the plant was on thin ice. Rumors started leaking to the Jackson Sun before they became public that the plant was going into bankruptcy. One day, literally in the middle of the day, I get a phone call to come to the plant, and the plant has stopped operating. Sort of like, I forget the time, it's in the book, but like 11:32 a.m., because at that moment, they ran out of funding to meet payroll. And everybody's just sent home from work. Nobody's got a clue what it is. It's for like 2 days, forever.
Wow.
And the plant is shut for a couple of months until United Foods, through some arrangements, takes it over.
What does the union man do during 2 months of shutdown, and when a new owner is coming in? We'll find out next as we continue. Phil Cohen is with us. The book is called The Jackson Project. It's the story of the Bemis Mill, 1989-1990. It's published by the University of Tennessee Press out of Knoxville. This is Dialogue at EPlusTV 6. Welcome back to Dialogue at EPlusTV 6, a conversation with Phil Cohen. He's the author of The Jackson Project, War in the Labor. It's the story of the Bemis Mill, March of 1989 to March of 1990. So the company installs the wrong equipment.
That's
but
right.
you say they had advice from people that should have known that the wood floors would vibrate as opposed to what was concrete, so they couldn't make any cloth that met specs.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. When the new company is coming, it was totally then impossible for the Oriental investor to just start over, to reinvest, to do something different. They got too far into it.
No, because he owed $3 million to this fella named Jimmy Gibbs, who was an equipment liquidator. And like no blame on him. Somebody wanted to buy his used looms, and he sold it to him.
Okay.
But what's incredulous to me, one of the darndest things I've ever seen in a career I've seen at all, was the two people who actually went to Europe to purchase these looms were management people who'd spent their life in the textile business. I mean, it's the equivalent of Steve not knowing what a microphone is. It's just absolutely unbelievable that they would put in the wrong looms.
All right. So it goes. So you get notice in the middle of the day that this plant is shut down.
Right.
Can't meet payroll. It's gonna take 2 months to get that corrected. Then you got new owners coming in. So what does a union organizer do when a plant suddenly, without notice, without expectation, ceases operation? And then what do you tell your membership? So what's your job?
Right. Okay. Well, first off, no one knew it was going to reopen in 2 months because the new takeover was kept entirely clandestine.
Okay.
I found out it was literally in the works the day the plant shut. But they were a very good job, both within the political community here in Jackson and the business community, kept it swept under the table because they were bringing in a very anti-union employer. So, but what do? First thing you do is you communicate with people, hold them together. You make sure that you network people with all the various government agencies so they get the support they need. So there's all sorts of tiers of unemployment benefits and other things, and paid education that kick in when a plant closes, that if you simply get fired for being drunk on the job, you can't access.
And so, and city leadership here didn't want you to know this then?
Well, they didn't want us to know that United Foods was taking over the plant.
Okay, all right. The reason being they hoped the union would go away and that United Foods could come in and
No,
start
I think
from scratch?
they simply wanted us to be blindsided.
Okay.
I mean, you know you're going to be ambushed, you're ready.
Okay. All right. So what happens then when the new company comes in, this third company within a year?
Okay. They come in, they just send out letters to all the employees that they are hiring, they're starting out as a new business, and they're going to hire whoever they darn please.
Okay, so no union contracts will be honored, no previous
That
commitments
is
will be
correct.
honored?
And they brought in, they rehired a lot of those new people who'd been hired in that 125.
Because they weren't union yet, or as many of them?
That's correct.
Right, okay.
And in fact, they were from a very anti-union part of Alabama.
Okay.
They were-
So they came in here?
Yeah,
Okay.
our plant had shut in Huntsville, Alabama,
Okay.
which at least at the time was notoriously anti-union.
Okay.
So they chose their additional workers very strategically.
Okay.
But people who'd been there 20, 30 years, pretty much everybody who was in the union's leadership was excluded from the rehiring. And some of these folks had exemplary work records.
Okay. So what did you do?
Well, initially, we inserted ourselves into the bankruptcy process because there are statutes in the bankruptcy code that are supposed to prevent making an end run of collective bargaining agreements. We filed charges with the National Labor Relations Board. We did things to pull workers together, and eventually, starting with the very beginning of 1990, we ran a picket line by the loading docks. I formed an alliance with the Teamsters. Okay. Actually, folks around who've been around here a while, remember them was Galen Mills.
Okay.
And we formed an alliance that Teamster trucks would not cross our picket line.
Okay.
And they had a right to do that under their contract. So we ran a blockade. Okay. So we fought them on the street, and we fought them in several different courtrooms.
What was the result of it?
The result was mixed. Ultimately, to take 10 chapters of the book and condense it into a soundbite, ultimately, the National Labor Relations Board required United Foods to recognize the union. But because of some technicalities of how many times the plant had changed hands, the old terms of collective bargaining no longer applied. So we had to start from scratch.
Okay.
We were in negotiations with United Foods. How the story would have ended, we'll never know, because United Foods was unable to make a go of the plant because it was like furbished with the wrong equipment.
Okay, all right. So they didn't change the equipment.
Did
they not know the problems when
Well, they did, because that was in that booklet that I told you about when they laid out. When they laid out.
But they thought they could correct it, or?
That I never know. That's always really been a question for me. One thing no one could ever accuse United Foods of is not being savvy. Okay, these guys are players. They're sharp players. Okay. And why they took over a mill, that had the wrong equipment in it, and thought they could turn it around in an industry they'd never been in before, has always been one of my big unanswered questions. Okay. But obviously, they thought they could.
When you left Jackson, what were the circumstances in 1990? You assigned somewhere else, or?
Yeah, I was assigned somewhere else. Okay. There's only so many union staff on the ground. Okay. And I frankly convinced the union leadership to keep me here months longer than I really had to stay, because I felt the commitment to the people and the local.
What do you want people to know about this book or get from this book?
First and foremost, I hope people really simply enjoy reading it. They experience it as a good, real-life action thriller, that they're moved by the people. I would say this book is guaranteed to open people's eyes and tear their heart out in terms of what working people in this country have to go through sometimes. But I also guarantee them that if they read this book, they'll come away understanding more about the reality of unions than they've learned in the whole rest of their life put together. And this isn't a work of propaganda. This book is the good, the bad, and the ugly. As I write about in the beginning, when I got here, this union local was a mess, and it was my job to turn it around. So if people just really want to have a sense of what unions are about, whatever their opinion is going to be afterwards, if they want to like it or they want to hate it, at least know what you're liking or hating.
Okay. Manufacturing has changed much today. It's automation. I go to factories now that you can eat off the floor. It amazes me. It's a totally different type of environment. Has it changed labor relations as far as, of course, you're a union guy.
Yes.
That's what you do. I mean, do you look at it now and say, this is better, or this is different, or?
I'll tell you what's made it different, at least in my world. Two things. One, textiles were the most anti-union industry in America.
Okay, and that industry's gone away.
Yeah, I mean, arbitrators used to refer to, like, where I worked as hostile textile country. But what's also changed, the biggest change, was the economic crash that really started in 2001, but really accelerated in 2008. Wall Street's doing great. Main Street's still in the toilet. And the truth is, both management and workers want to fight less. People are kind of happy to still have a plan, still have a job. So in some circumstances, people are more eager to reach an accommodation than when there was money to throw around.
The book is called The Jackson Project. It is War in the American Workplace, the story of Jackson, Tennessee, Phil Cohen's work as a union organizer from March 1989 to March 1990. It's our history in a different way. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for being with us, and we appreciate the time and appreciate seeing you. Stay with us here at EPlusTV 6. This is the place where the dialogue continues.